Terrorism is obsolete, but workers' position remains pivotal. Wildcats and sit-downs, consumer strikes, what could have happened in May '68, terrorism reinforces the state, the ultimate showdown, internationalism. And the fourth chapter, utopians fail to envision post-revolutionary diversity, decentralization and coordination, safeguards against abuses, consensus, majority rule, eliminating the roots of war and crime, abolishing money, absurdity of present-day labor, transforming work into play, technophobic objections, ecological issues, the blossoming of free communities, and more interesting problems. And I'm millions of people. It's not a matter of numbers, but of open-ended public dialogue and participation. The incident at the beginning of the 1964 free speech movement in Berkeley is a classic and particularly beautiful example. As police were about to take away an arrested civil rights activist on the university campus in Berkeley, a few students sat down in front of the police car. Within a few minutes, hundreds of others spontaneously followed their example, surrounding the car so it could not move. For the next 32 hours, the car roof was turned into a platform for freewheeling debate. The May 1968 occupation of the Sorbonne created an even more radical situation by drawing in much of the non-student Parisian population. The workers' occupation of factories throughout France then turned it into a revolutionary situation. In such situations, people become much more open to new perspectives, readier to question previous assumptions, quicker to see through the usual cons. Every day, some people go through experiences that lead them to question the meaning of their lives. But during a radical situation, practically everyone does so all at once. When the machine grinds to a halt, the cogs themselves begin wondering about their function. Bosses are ridiculed, orders are ignored, separations are broken down. Personal problems are transformed into public issues. Public issues that seemed distant and abstract become immediate practical matters. The old order is analyzed, criticized, satirized. People learn more about society in a week than in years of academic social studies or leftist, quote, consciousness raising. Long repressed experiences are revived. Everything seems possible, and much more is possible. People can hardly believe what they used to put up with in, quote, the old days. Even if the outcome is uncertain, the experience is often seen as worthwhile for its own sake. Quote, if we only have enough time, ... wrote one May 1968 graffitist, to which a couple others responded, quote, in any case, no regrets. And another one said, already 10 days of happiness. As work comes to a halt, rat race commuting is replaced by leisurely circulation, passive consumption by active communication. Strangers strike up lively discussions on street corners. Debates continue round the clock, new arrivals constantly replacing those who depart for other activities, or to try to catch a few hours of sleep, though they are usually too excited to sleep very long. While some people succumb to demagogues, others start making their own proposals and taking their own initiatives. Bystanders get drawn into the vortex and go through astonishingly rapid changes. A beautiful example from May 1968. The director of the National Odeon Theater was at first dismayed at its being taken over by the radical crowds. But after taking in the situation for a few minutes, he came forward and exclaimed, yes, now that you have it, keep it, never give it up. Burn it rather than do that. Of course, not everyone is immediately won over. Some people simply lay low, anticipating the time when the movement will subside and they can recover their possessions or their positions and take their revenge. Others waver, torn between desire for change and fear of change. An opening of a few days may not be enough to break a lifetime of hierarchical conditioning. The disruption of habits and routines can be disorienting as well as liberating. Everything happens so fast it's easy to panic. Even if you manage to keep calm, it's not easy to grasp all the factors in play quickly enough to determine the best thing to do, which may appear obvious in hindsight. One of the main purposes of the present text is to point out certain typical recurring patterns so that people can be prepared to recognize and exploit such opportunities before it's too late. Radical situations are the rare moments when qualitative change really becomes possible. Far from being abnormal, they reveal how abnormally repressed we usually are. They make our, quote, normal life seem like sleepwalking. Yet, of the vast number of books that have been written about revolutions, few have much to say about such moments. And then this is the closing of the entire work, the last chapter. So after this last chapter, I've talked about, as I say, how could this work? What would the economic things would be? How would the work get done? Blah, blah, blah. I've dealt with all those different things. But here is how I close. It's called More Interesting Questions Than Problems. An anti-hierarchical revolution will not solve all of our problems. It will simply eliminate some of the anachronistic ones, freeing us to tackle more interesting problems. If the present text seems to neglect the spiritual aspects of life, spiritual in quotes, this is because I wanted to stress some basic material matters that are often overlooked. But these material matters are only the framework. A liberated society will be based far more on joy and love and spontaneous generosity than on rigid rules or egoistic calculations. We can probably get a more vivid sense of what it might be like from visionaries like Blake or Whitman than from pedantic debates about economic credits and recallable delegates. I suspect that once people's basic material needs are generously taken care of, and they are no longer subjected to a constant barrage of commercial titillation, most of them, after brief binges of overindulgence in things they were previously deprived of, will find the greatest satisfaction in relatively simple and uncluttered lifestyles. The erotic and gustatory arts will undoubtedly be enriched in many ways, but simply as facets of full, rounded lives that also include a wide range of intellectual, aesthetic, and spiritual pursuits. Education, no longer limited to conditioning young people for a narrow role in an irrational economy, will be an enthusiastic, lifelong activity. In addition to whatever formal educational institutions there may still be, people will have instant access via books and computers to information on any subject they may wish to explore, and they'll be able to get hands-on experience in all sorts of arts and skills, or to seek out anyone for personal instruction or discussion, like the ancient Greek philosophers debating in the public marketplace, or the medieval Chinese monks wandering the mountains in search of the most inspiring Zen master. The aspects of religion that now serve as mere psychological escapes from social alienation will fade away, but the basic questions that have found more or less distorted expression in religion will remain. There will still be pains and losses, tragedies and frustrations. People will still face sickness, old age, and death. And in the process of trying to figure out what, if anything, it all means, and how to deal with it, some of them will rediscover what Aldous Huxley in the Perennial Philosophy refers to as the highest common factor of human consciousness. That would be like mystical kind of things. Others may cultivate exquisite aesthetic sensibilities, like the characters in Murasaki's Tale of Genji, or develop elaborate metacultural genres like the glass bead games in Hermann Hesse's novel, freed from the material limits that formerly confined such pursuits to narrow elites. I like to think that as these diverse pursuits are alternated, combined, and developed, there will be a general tendency toward the personal reintegration envisioned by Blake, and toward the genuine I-thou relations envisioned by Martin Buber. A permanent spiritual revolution in which joyous communion does not preclude rich diversity and generous contention. Leaves of Grass, Whitman's wishful thinking about the potentialities of the America of his day, perhaps comes as close as anything to conveying the expansive state of mind of such communities of fulfilled men and women, ecstatically working and playing, loving and loitering, strolling down the never-ending open road. With the proliferation of continually developing and mutating cultures, travel could once again be an unpredictable adventure. The traveler could see, quote, see the cities and learn the ways of many different peoples, unquote, from the Odyssey, without the dangers and disappointments faced by the wanderers and explorers of the past. Drifting from scene to scene, from encounter to encounter, but occasionally stopping like those barely visible human figures in Chinese landscape paintings, just to gaze into the immensity, realizing that all our doings and sayings are just ripples on the surface of a vast, unfathomable universe. These are just a few hints. We aren't limited to radical sources of inspiration. All sorts of creative spirits of the past have manifested or envisioned some of our almost unlimited possibilities. We can draw on any of them as long as we take care to extricate the relevant aspects from their original alienated context. The greatest works do not so much tell us something new as remind us of things we have forgotten. We all have intimations of what life can be like at its richest. Memories from early childhood, when experiences were still fresh and unrepressed, but also occasional later moments of love or camaraderie or enthusiastic creativity, times when we can't wait to get up in the morning to continue some project or simply to see what the new day will bring. Extrapolating from these moments probably gives the best idea of what the whole world could be like. A world as Whitman envisions it, and the rest of this is from Leaves of Grass, a world where the men and women think lightly of the laws, where the slave ceases and the master of slaves ceases, where the populace rise at once against the never-ending audacity of elected persons, where children are taught to be laws to themselves and to depend on themselves, where equanimity is illustrated in affairs, where speculations on the soul are encouraged, where women walk in public processions in the streets the same as the men, where they enter the public assembly and take places the same as the men. The main shapes arise, shapes of democracy total, that's capital democracy, result of centuries, shapes ever projecting other shapes, shapes of turbulent manly cities, shapes of the friends and home givers of the whole earth, shapes bracing the earth and braced with the whole earth. So let's see how we're doing here. How's everybody feeling?
Someone we're clapping for ourselves.
Okay, I think what I'll do is do about a 2-minute bringing it up to date, and then we can go into questions. Does that sound okay? So since that Public Secrets, which came out in '97, I started my website in '98, and so all this stuff is on there, and that's plus some stuff that isn't in the book. All my translations of my own stuff into other languages, all kinds of some new articles that I've written since that time.
Your website is?
The website is bopsecrets.org, but if you just search Ken Knabb or Bureau of Public Secrets, you'll find it. No problem. And incidentally, I have a mailing list back there on one of those tables somewhere. If you put your email in there, and please write legibly, then I'll keep you abreast of new things on my website and so on. So you can find on there Gateway to the Vast Realms, which is my recommendations of my top 500 favorite books and why they're interesting. Thing about France that Peter mentioned in 2006. Thing about Shimer College, the little college I mentioned, had an interesting struggle and victory just last year. And coming up in February, Adventure Seeks Adventurous, 3 years of online dating. Which explains what I've been doing the last 3 years. So that will be only at my website. I hardly publish. Since Public Secrets, I've mostly just put stuff on my website. So I'd like to go into question and answer mode now. And what I suggest is that we can go on and we'll kind of see how people are feeling, how long we want to go, and then take a break. And some people will go home, and then we can continue after the break for further if there are people still interested. And I would just suggest that to keep the questions focused on the themes or the things that I mentioned. And a good question could probably be done in less than 30 seconds. If it's more than 30 seconds, it's probably a spiel and not a question. So, whoa, Gifford.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that. Being in the poetry room, I want to just ask you and propose a possible answer. The connection between people like Rexroth and the Situationist, could it be, the Situationist said not poetry in the service of revolution, but revolution in the service of poetry. Just the tradition of the rebel poet like Li Po, who I think both Rexroth and the Situationists really loved. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of overlaps, but the thing is, once you get to a certain point, the Situationists were more dubious about the continued relevance of that. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even going to say which do I believe. Mm-hmm. I mean, I still enjoy reading poems, and I don't have a hard and fast thing there, but I can see their point that you arrive at a certain thing where you say, how am I going to express my creativity? Am I going to put some words in a rhythmic thing? Maybe. Mm-hmm. Certain things can be expressed well that way, but it may be that there are other things. I mean, just take the Snyder and me disrupting Snyder, just as a crude example. Snyder's reading great poems. He's a great poet, and I'm sure people liked that there. But yet, my experience going in there was that once I had done what I had done, it was demystified. It didn't mean that I stopped enjoying Snyder's poems, but there was no fetish anymore. I could look at some and say, well, what is this going to do? And something else, I think that gives me an idea to do something. It puts the more active thing there. And so I think there's where the Situationists would be more adamant, that their poetry was not this other stuff. Jerry?
How has the internet affected your sense of what's possible? You don't have to talk about the dating thing necessarily. Broadly.
Well, although many people, it's very easy to critique the web in different ways and say, this is alienated, people are sitting, blah, blah, blah. For me, I love it. I've been walking on clouds since 1998 because I'm doing the same kind of things that I was doing before, except that before, if I would, write a leaflet about something, I could hand it out to a few dozen or a few hundred people. I could mail it at expensive around, and that would slowly get around, and maybe somebody would translate it. But with my website, I can write something, email 3,000 people, plus posts, and say, this is here. The next day, 1,000 people have read it, the next week, somebody's already translated it into several different languages. You know, it doesn't guarantee anything about the quality. I mean, if it's a stupid leaflet that I wrote or something, you know, it doesn't make it better. But it just, you know, it makes it so much quicker to do that. So I have mostly positive feelings about that. Yes.
I have unlimited energy, so I'm prepared to stay till 6 in the morning.
That's
I
the
really
spirit.
would like to talk quickly in answer to his statement. There's a book that everyone should read. I'm trying to get City Lights to order it. It's from Polity Press. It's called Blog Theory. It's by a woman named Jodi, Jodi, Dean, Dean. She's a PhD in political science. She teaches at Hobart William College in the East, and it's the best leftist critique of the web. And it quotes from Debord a lot. If you've not heard of the book, it quotes from
Okay.
Lacan and Slavoj Žižek. And
You can make up for your spiel by getting me some more water.
Anyway, I wanted to say that Debord said that friendship takes you out of the spectacle, and that's very important. And Albert Einstein said change is the name of the game. Oh, that's wine. You don't drink wine?
No, that's apple.
That's
sparkling
fine.
apple
Oh.
That's
juice.
fine.
And
Okay, are there any questions?
no,
I actually have one quick comment and a question.
Yeah.
The comment is I was amused when 50 years ago you were a 16-year-old dropout and went to Shimer College. My daughter just turned
Dan is
16.
the Shimer guy.
My daughter turned 16 this year, dropped out of high school, went to Shimer College. I highly recommend dropping out at 16 and going to Shimer College. My question is, you mentioned Ron was a seminal influence on your life, and somewhere along the line in the 60s, I stopped hearing about him. What happened to
Ron
him?
Rothberg?
Yeah. Does he still...
Oh, yeah, he's right. In fact, you've
Are
met
you
him.
still...
Yeah, he's been at some of the Shimer things. Not a lot of them, but
Is he still active? Is he still involved? Is he still... I mean,
well, he was
obviously
active in the
dramatic-
Shimer thing.
Well, in terms of...
Not so much the political things, or he's tapered off.
That's what I was wondering, because he was such an influence on you.
Yes, Andy.
I'm a friend of Ken's, and I'm videotaping, and I wondered if there's any person here that would rather not have me aim a camera at them as we go forward. Is there anyone? I'd like your hand, just a show of hands or whatever. I just don't want to make people uncomfortable or impose on.
well, if it's
you
possible, I
folks.
would not like to be on videotape, but if I am, I'm in.
I just got your hand.
There is no privacy. There is
I
no
will-
privacy
all right,
in the
you-
world.
no, there-
It's
there-
long
there-
gone.
All right,
You mentioned
yeah,
the phrase
sorry.
that terrorism reinforces the state. Where did that come from?
That came from me.
George
I mean, it's fairly obvious. Ariel.
My absolute favorite all odds work by you is your work on Rexroth, to understand him, to present his wacky and true ideas that are distributed over 20 or 30 periodicals, and you analyze them, put them together, mail them fast, and they're a really wonderful contribution to human knowledge. But it's you on Rexroth.
But not me on the other stuff.
I haven't read much of the other stuff.
Okay.
I can hardly get through the stuff on Rexroth, but I've read a lot of Rexroth. And you're finally doing it right, making him a great man, which he isn't just all by himself.
Thank you. I might mention, I know Ariel because of that book, because she called me up one day and said, oh, I found this book and I bought 10 copies to give to my friends and blah, blah, blah. Among other things, my website, besides my own stuff, has a huge Rexroth archive. It has a lot of Rexroth's out-of-print books and essays and so on.
What do you think of things like flash mob, social swarming? Can you comment on Wikipedia?
You know, they can cut both ways. I mean, sometimes they can not amount to much, but I think it's kind of a fun idea. And actually, flash mob, the type of thing can be strategic. That same mode has been used during radical situations, very specifically, so that the police or whoever wouldn't know until the last minute where you were going to converge. So obviously that has possibilities. Even if it's not in a radical situation, it's kind of a fun thing to do, you know, like just converge on something and start. You've probably seen these things on YouTube where everybody starts singing an opera in the middle of a mall or something. Yeah, right. No problem.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm terrible at throwing stuff back at you, but I just wanted to know. Earlier you mentioned the state has they have preoccupied with hiding or the weapons that I guess people have, and I was just wondering if you could comment on a couple of what some of those weapons are that we have, and do we have more now than in, like, say, 30 years ago?
The latter is a little tricky, but examples of weapons, I mean, just to be very obvious, if 99% of people are oppressed or something, and there's a few people that are running things, it goes without saying that those 99% of people's one weapon is just to know that they're 99% and that something can be done different. That's a weapon, even if they don't have any pistol or something. It's just, in other words, if the struggle was purely like who's got, you know, more weapons or something like that, this society would have been overthrown hundreds of years ago. But the reason it isn't is that most people, most of the time, just kind of go along, you know, and they aren't aware that they could be doing something different. And if some situation comes up where things are kind of in question, then there's a whole bunch of stuff that the media or whatever can throw at them to say, oh, hey, there's terrorism over here. That's an example. You're right, in Italy, for example, back in the 60s, there were various times when workers were occupying factories and, you know, I mean, I'm talking like millions of people. And then a bomb goes off. And suddenly all eyes are for who did it? Was it anarchists or was it? And it turned out it was police. But this was several years later. The situationists at the time said, look, the police did this. It had nothing to do with the anarchists. But that debate, oh, the anarchists, and then they arrested all the anarchists, and then you know, this distracts attention from, you know, bombing had nothing to do with anything. It killed a bunch of people, and it accomplished its purpose, namely to kind of sidetrack something else that was going on, because people were, oh, that must get the idea. That's just one example. Elia?
I have a comment and a question, which is, I would like to get your feedback on this quote from John Ross, who is a poet who recently passed away. And he said something that, one of his poems is, "The revolution is not like a faucet. The revolution is not like a faucet. You can't turn it on and off. It leaks all the time." And I like that. I believe that it is true that another thing that Paul Goodman said was, imagine how you want people to treat each other in a future society. Start treating each other that way now. And I'm wondering what your take on sort of the revolution being this process rather than this like one big event, and what situationists thought about it too.
You know, I hesitate to go into these kind of things very much because it's such a big, obviously the process affects the outcome. But on the other hand, people can get so caught up in saying, well, let's be nice now, or if we don't like violence, then we should not do anything, you know, because we would be contributing to violence. And